The heat over the tarmac shimmered like a living thing, bending light into watery mirages that danced above the asphalt. A convoy of dust-streaked Humvees rumbled through the main gate of forward operating Base Ranger, kicking up a brown haze. That clung to the air long after the engines died. The soldiers unloading crates barely noticed the figure who stepped down from the last vehicle. A woman in faded jeans, a pale khaki shirt, and a ball cap pulled low over her eyes. No rank. Patches, no name tag, no visible weapon. Just a civilian, it seemed, blending in with the mix of medics, contractors, and relief personnel. She moved with the convoy at first, helping pass down boxes of medical supplies, bottled water, and portable generators. But while the others laughed, cursed, or mopped sweat from their brows, her gaze kept drifting toward the flight line. Row after row of F-15E Strike Eagles sat under the blinding sun, their canopies glinting like the eyes of predatory birds. Maintenance crews bustled around them, checking ordnance racks, rolling fuel hoses, calibrating targeting pods. Each time a jet's engine spooled up for a systems test, the woman's head tilted ever so slightly, as though she could hear something in the tone others couldn't. A pair of young airmen, leaning against a tool cart, noticed her stare. Civilian. Looks like she's casing the place, one murmured. The other smirked. Probably some aid worker with a crush on pilots. She didn't hear them, or if she did, she didn't care. Her eyes moved from the flight line to the squat concrete structure at the far end, the pilot's ready room. No one went in there without clearance. And yet, her feet seemed to orient toward it every time she shifted her stance. The air was suddenly split by the wail of the base alert siren. Its rising and falling howl cut through every conversation, every idle motion. Soldiers froze mid-step. Technicians dropped tools. Even the generators seemed to hum a little quieter. Then came the announcement over the loudspeakers. Clipped, urgent, impossible to mistake. Inbound hostile aircraft. This is not a drill. All flight personnel report immediately. Around her, the base transformed in seconds. Pilots sprinted for their gear. Ground crews scrambled toward jets, tugging power cables free, wheeling away ladders. The air filled with the deep thrum of engines starting, the acrid tang of jet fuel burning into the heat. Civilians were herded toward the blast bunkers. A sergeant barked at her to move with the others. But she didn't. She stood still, eyes fixed on the ready room as if the chaos around her were happening on mute. And then she moved, not toward the bunkers, not toward safety, but toward the very heart of the storm. She walked with deliberate purpose, threading through the swirl of shouting mechanics and darting vehicles. A forklift rolled past, its driver honking furiously when she didn't yield. She slipped between two fueling trucks without looking up. The air seemed to bend around her, not in any mystical way, but in the way people unconsciously stepped. Aside, too focused on their own crisis to question her presence. A lieutenant running past with his helmet under his arm nearly collided with her. He opened his mouth to tell her off, then hesitated, his eyes flicking to hers. Whatever he saw there made him simply nod once and keep moving. The ready room door was guarded by two armed security forces airmen. They were scanning ID badges and shouting names into a clipboard list. When she reached them, one raised a hand automatically to stop her. "Ma'am, you can't." She didn't slow down. She didn't flash a badge. She didn't even speak. She just met his eyes for a fraction of a second, and his words faltered. His partner frowned, but inexplicably didn't move to block her either. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room smelled of sweat, coffee, and jet fuel residue. Pilots were suiting up. Flight suits half-sipped, G-suits buckled, oxygen masks dangling. A wall-mounted TV showed a radar feed. 5 red blips moving fast toward the base, closing the distance with each sweep of the screen. The colonel was in the center, a tall, broad-shouldered man with silver at his temples and a voice like a drill. Sergeant's megaphone. We've got 2 birds ready to scramble. I want them up now. Everyone else. He broke off mid-sentence, noticing her for the first time. The chatter in the room faltered. Several pilots glanced her way, puzzled. You lost, ma'am? The colonel demanded, his tone more annoyed than curious. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze swept the room, taking in the gear racks, the maps, the mission board scrawled with cal signs. Then she looked at the radar again. 5 inbound. 2 ready to launch, she said quietly. You're short 3. The colonel's brows knitted. That's classified information. Who the hell are you? Her lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. I'm someone who knows you don't have enough pilots in the air. A murmur rippled through the room. The colonel's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, the radar operator shouted, 20 miles out. Get her out of here, the colonel snapped. She didn't argue. Instead, she stepped forward, closing the distance to the central table where the mission planners worked. She reached into the canvas bag slung over her shoulder and set something on the map, a worn leather-bound logbook. The room fell silent. The colonel stared at it, then slowly reached down, flipping. It opened. The first page bore a set of USAF wings, embossed in gold, and beneath them a name that made his eyes narrow in recognition. Page after page was filled with mission entries, each dated, logged, and signed. Many were stamped with a red classified. Bar. The colonel looked up at her. She said nothing. The radar beeped again, louder now, closer. Outside, the engines of 2 F-15s roared as they taxied for takeoff. And still, she stood there, calm as the desert sky, waiting. The radar screen pulsed in the dim light of the command center, each sweep of the green line bringing the 5 red blips closer. They moved in perfect formation, cutting across the sky at supersonic speed, each one a needle aimed at the heart of the base. 17 miles and closing, the radar operator called out, voice tight. Colonel Harris stood at the head of the table, knuckles pressed against the worn surface of the mission map. His voice was clipped, controlled, the tone of a man who knew panic was contagious and refused to let it spread. We've got Hammer 2 and Falcon 1 already spooling up. That's all we've got ready. That's 2 jets against 5, sir, Captain Ruiz, the operations officer, said. Even with ground-based SAMs, those odds are... I know the odds, Harris snapped, not looking up. Get the SAM crews hot. Make sure the fuel dump is sealed. Civilians in bunkers. In the corner of the room, the woman from the convoy, the one who had walked straight past armed guards, stood motionless. She didn't fidget, didn't speak, didn't even glance at the uniformed personnel bustling around her. Her eyes were locked on the radar feed, like a hunter watching prey through a scope. Finally, she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the din like a knife. What's the call sign for your F-15s? Every head in the room turned toward her. Colonel Harris straightened, fixing her with a stare. Excuse me? I asked what call sign your Eagles are flying under, she said evenly, as if she were asking about the weather. Harris narrowed his eyes. Who the hell are you? And why are you in my command center? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into the canvas bag still slung over her shoulder and pulled out the same worn leather flight log she'd set on the mission table moments earlier. She laid it down in front of him, sliding it across the table until it stopped. At the edge of the radar display, Harris hesitated before picking it up. The leather was scuffed, the gold USAF wings on the cover dulled with age. Inside, the first page bore a name he recognized instantly. a name that had once been spoken with a mix of admiration and disbelief among fighter squadrons. He flipped through the pages. Dozens of sorties. Air-to-air kills. Engagements over. 3 different theaters of war. Many missions stamped in bold red, classified. "This is a hell of a forgery if it's fake," Harris muttered. "It's not fake," she said, meeting his eyes without blinking. "I flew with the 44th Fighter Squadron. I've logged more hours in an F-15 than anyone in this room. You're short a pilot. I'm here." The room went quiet, except for the steady beep of the radar. Captain Ruiz leaned in toward the colonel. "Sir, we don't have time to vet this. If she's telling the truth." Harris cut him off. "She hasn't flown in 8 years, the woman said, anticipating him. "But the stick hasn't changed. Neither have the enemies." The radar operator broke in. 13 miles and closing. Harris turned back to her. "You're not on the roster. You're not even in the system anymore. You walked in here with no orders, no chain of command. And yet here I am," she interrupted, "with the skill to keep this base from turning into a crater." The colonel's jaw worked as he studied her. There was something in her tone, not arrogance, not even bravado, but the calm certainty of someone who had been here before and survived it. "Get her a bird," Harris said finally, the words coming out like they tasted bad. The room stirred with disbelief. Ruiz blinked. "Sir, you heard me. Get a crew on Eagle 3. Now." Ruiz didn't argue. He bolted for the flight line, already barking into his radio. The woman didn't smile or thank him. She simply picked up the helmet bag sitting beside the logbook, as if she'd known all along the conversation would end this way. As she turned to leave, Harris called after her. "What's your name?" She paused in the doorway. "Call signs Ghost Hawk." Then she was gone, swallowed by the organized chaos outside. Out on the tarmac, the sun hammered down on the crews as they scrambled around Eagle 3. The jet had been sitting in standby, half prepped for a training sortie later that week. Now mechanics were moving with the speed of men who knew seconds could mean survival. Panels slammed shut. Fuel hoses hissed. A weapons chief personally armed the Sidewinders and MRAMs, double-checking each pylon. Ghost Hawk moved among them, without hesitation, pulling on a flight suit that had been fetched from stores. It was slightly too big, not hers, but close enough. She zipped it up, clipped the G-suit straps tight, and began her pre-flight checks with the ease of a woman who had done this hundreds of times. On the edge of the tarmac, Ruiz was still on comms with the other 2 pilots. "Hammer 2, Falcon 1, Ghost Hawk will join as Eagle 3. Repeat, Eagle 3 is launching. Adjust intercept course accordingly." From the cockpit of Hammer 2, a gruff voice replied. "Ghost Hawk? Thought she was a ghost story." "Not today," Ruiz said. Ghost Hawk climbed the ladder into the cockpit, the metal warm under her gloves. She slid into the seat, the familiar scent of electronics and hydraulic fluid filling her lungs. Her hands moved across the switches in toggles without conscious thought. Battery on. Avionics live. HUD bright green in front of her eyes. The ground crew chief climbed halfway up the ladder, leaning in. "Ma'am, just so you know, she's an old bird. Not all the upgrades." Ghost Hawk met his eyes through the tinted visor. "She'll fly." He hesitated, then nodded and climbed down. The canopy lowered with a pneumatic hiss. In the command center, Harris stood over the radar display, eyes tracking the 3 friendly blips now moving to intercept the 5 hostile ones. His operations team was a blur of motion around him, relaying updates to ground defenses, feeding weather data to the pilots, keeping comms lines clear. Still, a small part of him couldn't shake the unease. He had just given a multi-million-dollar warplane to a woman who, on paper, didn't exist anymore. He glanced at her logbook still lying on the table. One entry caught his eye. A mission. Date from 9 years ago, stamped top secret in red. No location, no details. Just a single note in the remarks column. Survived. The radar beeped again, faster now. Harris straightened. Let's see if she still has it. The desert sky was a blinding expanse of blue when Ghost Hawk's F-15E rolled onto the taxiway. Heat shimmer rippled off the tarmac, the air alive with the thrum of engines winding up to full power. Inside the cockpit, she adjusted her oxygen mask, the hiss of compressed air in her ears, a strangely familiar comfort. Her HUD painted the airspace in glowing green lines. Ahead, Hammer 2 and Falcon 1 were already rolling toward the runway threshold. Their comms chatter was clipped and focused, seasoned professionals running through last-second checks before climbing into a fight they might not come back from. Eagle 3, you're number 3 in sequence. The tower's voice crackled. Copy. Ghost Hawk replied, her voice level. Back in the command center, Colonel Harris paced behind the radar operator, watching the 3 blue blips move into formation. The red blips on the other side of the screen were closing fast. If they held current speed, the intercept would happen in less than 5 minutes. Captain Ruiz leaned toward him. Sir, I ran her call sign through every active and reserve database. Nothing. She's not even listed as retired. It's like she was erased. Harris didn't look away from the screen. Or buried. You think she's Black Ops? Ruiz asked. I think she's flown missions no one's allowed to talk about, Harris said. The logbook still sat on the table beside him. On one page, in her tight, precise handwriting, was an entry from 8 years ago. Bait, classified aircraft, F-15E. Mission, classified result, classified remarks. Do not repeat. Harris tapped the page with a finger, then closed the book. Whatever she is, she's ours for the next 20 minutes. Let's hope that's enough. On the flight line, Ghost Hawk's jet reached the hold short point. The engine's low. Growl vibrated through the frame, a steady heartbeat of thrust and power. She glanced at the gauges, everything in the green. Her mind, however, wasn't on the dials. For 8 years, she'd stayed off radar, figuratively and literally. She'd left the Air Force without ceremony, vanishing into the kind of work that didn't leave paper trails. She'd flown missions for allies who didn't officially acknowledge they had her. She'd landed on airstrips that didn't exist on maps, evaded radars no one admitted were in operation, and faced enemy pilots whose names were only spoken in dark rooms. But she'd promised herself she was done. No more missions. No more cockpits. No more of the rush that came from dancing on the knife's edge between skill and death. Then came the convoy job, just a simple escort gig, moving supplies across a war zone. She'd thought she could stay in the background. And then she saw the flight line at Afo Granger. Saw the F-15s. Felt that old pull in her chest. And when the alert sirens wailed, she knew she'd never been done. Not really. Eagle flight, cleared for immediate departure, the tower called. Hammer 2 roared down the runway, nose lifting, gear tucking in. Falcon 1 followed seconds later, afterburners igniting in twin spears of fire. Ghost Hawk's turn. She eased the throttles forward, the engines answering with a deepening roar. The acceleration pressed her into the seat, the runway blurring beneath her. At rotation speed, she pulled gently, the nose lifting toward the sky. The wheels left the ground, and the earth dropped away beneath her. As the jet climbed, her hands moved instinctively over the controls. Flaps up, gear up, power steady. Eagle 3 airborne, she reported. Hammer 2's voice came over comms. Good to have you up here, Ghost Hawk. Thought you were just a story old pilots told. Sometimes, she said, stories are real. The three F-15s leveled off in a loose arrowhead formation, their contrails slicing the thin air at 25,000 feet. Ahead, the enemy formation showed on radar. 5 Su-27 flankers, moving fast, spread just wide enough to make targeting all of them at once impossible. From the command center, Ruiz updated Harris. They're Russian-built, but markings are scrubbed. Could be Mercs, could be foreign Air Force. No IFF signals. Harris studied the screen. They didn't come all this way for sightseeing. They want something on this base. Ghost Hawk studied her radar scope. The flankers were beautiful in their own way, lethal, maneuverable, and flown by pilots who knew how to make them dance. She'd fought them before, in skies where neither side would ever admit the other had been. Hammer 2's voice was all business. We'll pair off. Falcon, you take lead with me. Ghost Hawk, you're high cover until we split. Copy, she said, her tone giving nothing away. In truth, she was already thinking 3 moves ahead. The way the flankers were flying told her they weren't just on a strike run. They were probing, testing response times, measuring resistance. She'd seen this pattern before, in a mission she was never supposed to talk about. That mission had ended with her ejecting over enemy territory, 2 days on the run, and an extraction. That cost lives. The thought tightened her jaw. Not this time. Back at the base, Harris kept one ear on the pilot's comms and the other on the ground defense channels. SAM crews ready. Fuel depots sealed. Civilians secure, Ruiz reported. Harris nodded. Eyes still on the radar. Keep the channel clear. When they merge, we'll have less than 30 seconds to make it count. On the big screen, the distance between the blue and red blips shrank, sweep by sweep. In the air, Ghost Hawk's HUD lit up as the range closed. She flipped her weapon selector to A, air-to-air, and armed her first AMRAAM. Targeting tone in her headset was steady, patient, waiting for the perfect lock. Her breathing slowed, her focus narrowed. The chatter in her mind faded until there was nothing but the hum of the engines, the glow of the HUD, and the green diamonds marking her targets. Hammer 2's voice cut in. Eagle Flight, weapons. Free. Ghost Hawk's finger hovered over the trigger. The fight was about to begin. The countdown in Jenna's mind had already started before the AWACS call came through. Hostiles are at 24 miles. Speed Mach 1.2. They're closing fast. Her fingers tightened on the throttle as the Fi-18's engines roared under her. She didn't feel fear. Not yet. Just the cold, steady rush of focus that every pilot dreams of, the tunnel vision where everything outside the mission dissolves. She could see the blips on her radar screen now, small green dots, clustered in a loose V formation. 5 enemy. Jets, unknown pilots, unknown skill level. It didn't matter. Her squadron was too far to help. This was hers. Eagle 6, tally 5 bogies, 18 miles out, Angels 15, she called over comms. A voice crackled back the AWACS operator. Eagle 6, rules of engagement are green. You are cleared hot. She didn't hesitate. Her right hand moved to arm the AIM-120 AMRAAMs. Her left kept the Hornet steady. The heads-up display glowed, targeting brackets closing on the lead jet. For a split second, her mind flashed back to the hangar 3 hours earlier, her walking past crews who still didn't know she was more than just the spare pilot. She remembered overhearing one mechanic whisper to another, "She's probably just filling a seat." She smiled now, inside her helmet. Guess they'll find out. 15 miles. She thumbed the pickle button. The AMRAAM's tone changed, a high-pitched lock-on beep. The missile ripped free from the pylon with a burst of smoke and flame, disappearing into the clouds. seconds later impact. A bright flash bloomed in the distance. One enemy jet spiraled out, a trail of black smoke behind it. Splash one. Jenna's voice was steady, almost cold. But the others didn't break off. They closed in fast. The enemy formation split into two pairs and a lone wingman, coming at her from multiple angles. Her advantage was gone. This was about to be a knife fight. She rolled hard left, pulling the Hornet into a steep climb. The Gi forces pressed her deep into the seat, but her breathing stayed controlled. She could hear the growl of the short-range AIM-9 Sidewinder in her headset as she locked onto another target in the climb. Missile away, another explosion. 2 down. Now they were angry. The remaining 3 jets switched to aggressive maneuvers, 1 diving low, 2 staying high to cut her off. She flipped to guns, the M61 Vulcan spinning up with a mechanical whine. A jet crossed in front of her, too close. She squeezed the trigger. Tracer rounds lit the sky like a stream of molten beads. The enemy tried to roll away, but she clipped. The tail section. The jet tumbled violently before erupting into fire. 3 down. Her breathing was quickening now, not from panic, but from the brutal turns. The last 2 enemy jets were playing it smart, trying to box her in. She dropped altitude, skimming just above the ocean, spray kicking up behind her. Radar warnings screamed lock on. She dumped flares, pulling into a sharp barrel roll, the incoming missile veering off in a flash. She came out of the maneuver behind the attacker, closing in fast. Another squeeze of the trigger, another spray of Vulcan Fire 4 down. Only 1 left. This one didn't run. Instead, it turned straight into her, closing the distance at impossible speed. At the last second, both jets banked, circling each other like predators. Jenna's voice was calm over Combs. AWACS, Eagle 6 last bandit's mine. They danced in the sky for 30 more seconds, each trying to get the other in their sights. Finally, Jenna pulled a high yo-yo maneuver, climbing just enough to swing down onto the enemy's tail. She didn't hesitate, sidewinder away. The final explosion lit up the horizon. She was alone now, the sky silent except for the hum of her own engines. 5 enemy jets in 22 minutes. Her breathing slowed. Her hands were steady, but she knew this wasn't over. If there were 5 here, there could be more. And now every hostile in 100 miles knew her call sign. She keyed the mic. AWACS, Eagle 6 skies clear, requesting vectors home. There was a pause. Then the AWACS controller's voice came back, quiet, almost reverent. Eagle 6, you just made history. Back at base, crews would be waiting, their disbelief turning to shock when they saw her step out of the cockpit. And maybe, just maybe, the mechanic who had doubted her would remember this day for the rest of his life. But Jenna wasn't thinking about that yet. She was already scanning the sky. Because in her world, victory wasn't the end. It was just the moment before the next fight. The smell of heated electronics and jet fuel mixed in the cockpit. The F-22 systems purring like a predator still hungry for the hunt. Emily Falcon Carter's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sharp electric rush of combat. She had just sent the 3rd enemy jet spiraling into the ocean. A blazing ball of fire swallowed by waves, but there was no time to savor the victory. Her HUD lit up again. 2 more red blips remained. Falcon, you've still got company. At your 6? Command's voice cut in, tense but controlled. I see them, Emily replied, voice steady, eyes darting across her displays. She eased the throttle forward. The F-22 roared in response, pushing her deeper into the fight. These last 2 were faster, more disciplined. The earlier kills had been quick, clean bursts of missiles and precise cannon fire, but these 2 were clearly the best of the squadron. They were flying in a tight pair, weaving in and out of each other's formations, like dancers with knives. Emily's mind flashed back to her father's words when she was 17, flying a beat-up crop duster over Kansas fields. Never chase, make them come to you. That same principle worked in combat. The more aggressive enemy would always make the mistake. First, she broke left hard, pulling a high G turn that pressed her body into the seat like a slab of lead. Her breathing slowed into the practiced rhythm inhale. Short exhale keeping her conscious and sharp despite the crushing forces. One of the enemy jets broke off to follow her, the other climbing to flank from above. She smirked. Gotcha. Instead of running, Emily cut her throttle sharply, letting the pursuing jet overshoot. In less than a heartbeat, she flipped the predator-prey dynamic. The enemy pilot's surprise was obvious. He banked hard to evade, but Emily was already locked on. A burst from her M61 Vulcan cannon tore across the sky, 20mm shells stitching a deadly line across the fuselage. The jet's left wing shredded, and flames erupted. It spiraled downward, the pilot ejecting just before the ocean claimed another wreck. 4 confirmed, Command said, his tone shifting part disbelief, part awe. But Emily wasn't celebrating. Yet, the 5th and final enemy jet was already diving at her from above, forcing her into a barrel roll that barely avoided a missile streaking past her canopy. She could feel the enemy's confidence. It was almost like a physical pressure in the air. They weren't just trying to kill her. They wanted to humiliate her, to prove that her earlier victories were luck. She could almost hear their cocky chatter in another language, taunting her. Fine. She'd answer in the only language fighter pilots respected skill. She banked into a vertical climb, every muscle in her neck straining as she fought gravity. The F-22's engine screamed, the G forces biting at her vision, but she pushed higher, luring the enemy to follow. At 40,000 feet, the air thinned, and both jets began to lose maneuverability. That was when she inverted her plane, dropping like a stone behind her pursuer. The move was pure insanity. It was the kind of maneuver that could easily cause a mid-air stall if the pilot didn't balance throttle and control perfectly. But Emily had done it 100 times in simulators, and now, with her life on the line, she made it look effortless. Her radar tone went steady target lock. The enemy pilot must have realized it too late. Emily squeezed the trigger, sending a Sidewinder missile streaking forward. In less than a second, the missile kissed the enemy jet's tail, and the explosion loomed like an angry sun. Pieces rained down toward the Pacific below. Falcon, that's 5. Repeat, 5 confirmed kills. The command center erupted behind the radio chatter. Emily allowed herself a breath. 22 minutes since the first missile launch. And the sky was hers again. The radar screen was clear. No more red blips, no more danger, at least for now. But beneath the adrenaline was something else. She knew she had just painted a massive target on her back. Whoever sent those enemy jets would want to know who Falcon was, and they'd come looking. She glanced out at the horizon, watching. The sun sink lower, painting the clouds gold. Command Falcon, area clear, returning to base. The silence before command responded told her everything word of what she had done was already spreading like wildfire. Tomorrow, the world would know her name. The 4th enemy jet had vanished from her radar, but Emily's instincts told her it hadn't retreated. Pilots didn't just abandon a fight this deep in contested airspace. Not unless they were setting a trap. She scanned the horizon eyes, darting from cloud cover to the jagged mountain ridges below, knowing the 5th fighter was out there, somewhere, waiting. Her oxygen mask was tight against her face, her breathing steady but deeper now. She eased her F-15 into a slow climb, trying to change her altitude enough to break any missile lock. The radio crackled with the voices of 2 U.S. pilots approaching from 60 miles out, offering backup. Emily declined. She didn't have time to wait. Every second that passed gave a hidden enemy more control. Her mind went to years of training. The hours spent in the simulator, practicing evasive maneuvers against unseen foes. The mental chess games instructors drilled into her until they were muscle memory. She knew how to bait a predator into revealing itself. She leveled out at 28,000 feet, throttled back slightly, and made herself appear vulnerable. The trap worked. A blip appeared on her radar, closing fast from her right flank. No words on the radio. No call signs. Just the silent, predatory approach of an enemy who thought they had her cornered. Emily didn't turn toward it. She let them close the distance. 10 miles, 8, 6. The hairs on her neck stood up. Then, the faint shimmer of a shadow. Against the clouds, a silver dart slicing in from above and behind, trying to drop into her blind spot. Emily banked hard left, pulling more than 6 gigaseconds, her body pressing into the seat with bone-crushing force. The enemy's first missile streaked past her canopy, close enough for her to see the white smoke trail before it detonated harmlessly in the distance. The enemy overshot, trying to pull around for another attack. Now she was the hunter. She slammed her throttles forward, afterburners igniting with a roar that shook the cockpit. The F-15 surged ahead, swinging wide into a high-G barrel roll that put her directly on the enemy's tail. The G force clawed at her vision, tunneling her sight, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through. On her HUD, the enemy's aircraft glowed red, target lock achieved. The pilot in front realized too late what had happened. They dove for the deck, trying to use the mountains as cover. Emily followed, weaving between jagged peaks at over 700 miles per hour. Her fingers hovered over the trigger. The enemy banked hard, nearly scraping the ridge. Emily stayed on them, her wings just meters from the rock face at times. She fired a short burst from her 20mm Vulcan cannon tracer rounds, slicing the air. The first missed, the second connected. Sparks erupted from the enemy's tail section. Smoke, fire. The enemy pilot ejected, their jet slamming into the canyon wall in a ball of flame. Emily didn't celebrate. Her radar showed nothing, no more enemy contacts, but she knew better than to relax. Her body was shaking from adrenaline, but her hands were steady on the controls. She keyed the mic. Control, this is Raven 2. Sky is clear. Repeat, sky is clear. The response came through static. Raven 2. We just received confirmation. You've downed 5 enemy fighters in 22 minutes. Return to base. She exhaled slowly. 22 minutes. 5 kills. Alone. The flight back was silent. The sunset bathed the sky in gold and crimson. The kind of beauty only pilots could see from this altitude. But in Emily's mind, it wasn't beautiful. She replayed every maneuver, every decision. She thought about the pilots she had faced, the skill in their movements, the risk they had taken. War wasn't about numbers. But today, numbers were all anyone else would see. When she touched down, the runway was lined with crew, mechanics, and officers. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. She popped the canopy, unstrapped, and pulled off her helmet. The roar of cheers hit her like a wave. She climbed down, boots touching the tarmac, and the base commander was already striding toward her. You just made history, Captain, he said, shaking her hand. Emily gave a faint smile, but didn't answer right away. She glanced back at her F-15, its wings streaked with heat scoring, its fuselage dotted with the grime of combat. Let's just say, she replied finally, they know I'm a pilot now. The crowd laughed, but Emily's eyes were distant. She knew the fight wasn't over. This was just one battle in a much bigger war. The moment Elena banked hard left to avoid a missile streaking past her canopy, She felt the shift in the battle's rhythm. This wasn't just chaos anymore. It was desperation. The enemy jets had stopped circling like predators. They were now hunting recklessly, gunning for her with single-minded rage. She had humiliated them, and in their fury, they were making mistakes. Her F-35's heads-up display lit up with rapid missile lock warnings. Too many at once. A pilot with less experience might have panicked. Elena's hands, however, moved with surgical precision, flaring chaff, pulling sharp climbs, cutting thrust, and re-engaging afterburners in unpredictable bursts. To the radar, she was a flickering ghost. Below, the Naval Task Force watched, in awe from their ship's decks. Every so often, they caught a glimpse of her jet streaking across the clouds before vanishing again. On comms, her calls were short, clipped, and calm, betraying none of the danger she was in. 2 down. She reported after another sharp dive ended with an AIM-120 detonating 100 meters behind an enemy wing. The explosion's shockwave rattled her teeth, but she was already rolling away before the debris hit the ocean. The third enemy jet tried to bait her into following, dropping low, almost skimming the water before sharply pulling up. Elena knew the trick. If she followed directly, she'd fly right into the targeting cone of the others waiting above. Instead, she pulled a fake-out, descending in pursuit, then cutting thrust mid-drop. Her F-35 floated for a moment in near silence, before she snapped the nose up and unleashed a missile without radar lock. It screamed forward on pure instinct. Seconds later, impact. 3 down. The enemy pilots were now calling to each other frantically in a language most of the Americans below couldn't understand. But tone needed no translation. They were afraid. And worse for them, fear in the sky is fatal. Still, fear also makes cornered enemies unpredictable. 2 of them dove together, weaving in tight formation to cover each other's blind spots. It was a smart move. They were forcing her into a narrow engagement zone where her stealth advantage meant less. Elena didn't take the bait. Instead, she climbed higher than they expected, until the sun blazed directly behind her. To their radars, she was gone. To their eyes, she was just glare and sky. She came down like a thunderbolt. Her first missile struck clean. The other pilot in the formation swerved hard, the shockwave spinning his jet sideways. Before he could recover, Elena was already firing again, a short-range missile at near point-blank distance. The detonation lit the clouds like a flare. 4. Her voice over comms was still steady, but her breathing was harder now. The G-forces, the maneuvers, the sheer mental strain. She could feel the fight wearing her down. 1 target left, but this one wasn't running. He was climbing, pulling away, almost as if retreating, but Elena knew better. High altitude meant speed and energy, and if he got far enough, he could dive with maximum force and surprise her. She throttled up, the roar in her ears now matched by the pounding in her chest. The chase was brutal. He was good, cutting angles, throwing false turns, trying to bait her into overshooting. For a moment, she respected him. Then she remembered the chaos below, the civilians this engagement was protecting, and her resolve hardened. She climbed after him, matching every turn, refusing to break pursuit. When he finally dove, she dove harder. The clouds ripped past, condensation streaming along her canopy. Missile lock? She fired. The enemy pilot must have seen it too late, because instead of breaking away, he hesitated. That half-second cost him everything. The missile struck true, a bloom of flame against the pale blue. Splash 5, she reported. Silence fell over the comms for a heartbeat. Then cheers, whoops, and pure disbelief from the task force. Somewhere in the noise, a voice said, "She just did what 2 squadrons couldn't." Elena didn't answer. She just leveled her F-35, the adrenaline finally ebbing, and looked out over the sea, calm now, as if none of it had happened. But she knew the truth. The sky never forgets. The hangar was silent, except for the occasional drip of rain from the corrugated roof, echoing in the cavernous space like a metronome marking the seconds. The warbird she had flown scarred, scorched, and streaked with grime stood in the yard. Center, a testament to the chaos of 22 minutes that had already been whispered into legend. Crew members moved around it, but their eyes kept drifting to her, some in awe, others in disbelief. No one spoke to her yet. They didn't know if they should offer congratulations, ask questions, or simply stay out of her way. Captain Elena. Torres stood with her helmet tucked under her arm, flight suit streaked with sweat and smoke. She had just returned from what command was already calling the 5-for-5 engagement. Every person in that hangar had heard the impossible story. A single pilot, outnumbered 5-to-1 by advanced enemy fighters, not only survived, but destroyed them all in just 22 minutes. But there was another part no one in the hangar knew: the order she'd received before takeoff, the classified clearance, and why she was even in that jet in the first place. The commanding officer, Colonel James West, strode in. He was a man who had seen 20 years of combat, known for his unshakable composure. Yet now, he looked at Elena like she was a puzzle that didn't fit the picture. "You," he said, stopping a few feet from her. "You're not even on the active pilot roster for this base." Elena didn't flinch. "Sir, the roster was outdated." "Outdated, my—" West stopped himself, glancing at the small crowd forming within. Earshot. He motioned toward his office. Now, inside, the blinds were drawn. West closed the door, leaned against his desk, and folded his arms. "You want to tell me why a ground crew technician just flew one of my F-35s into combat without clearance?" Elena set the helmet down slowly. "Because, sir, there wasn't anyone else who could." "That's not good enough," West said, his voice low but sharp. "You're not even assigned to combat operations. Hell, you're not even supposed to have access to the flight protocols." Her gaze was steady. "With respect, sir, I was a combat pilot for 8 years before reassignment. I flew in the Baltic Skies operation. I've clocked over 1,000 hours in combat zones." West blinked. "That's classified history." "Yes, sir," she replied. And yet, when the alert came in that 5 enemy jets had broken through the line and were heading straight for our supply convoy, no one in the air wing was in position to intercept. You would have lost that convoy, and the lives of every man and woman guarding it. The colonel stared at her for a long moment. Then he exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You went up against 5 state-of-the-art interceptors and walked away." "I didn't walk away, sir. I brought everyone else home." Word of the engagement spread far beyond the base. News crews wanted interviews, though none were granted. Intelligence agencies requested debriefings. Pilots she'd never met shook her hand, some with genuine respect, others with the competitive glint of someone who'd just seen a new benchmark set. In the barracks, the younger recruits treated her like a ghost story come to life. They whispered details, some true, most exaggerated. One swore she had laughed over the radio when the first enemy jet went down. Another claimed she'd been blindfolded, flying purely by feel. She ignored all of it. But the official report told a clearer truth. In 22 minutes, Elena Torres had executed maneuvers most pilots would never even attempt outside of a simulator. She had evaded 12 missile locks, countered 6 gun passes, and turned 2 enemy pilots into their own wingman's line of fire. By the end, she had expended nearly every round of her internal cannon and all air-to-air missiles, her fuel levels dangerously low. Her actions had prevented the destruction of a convoy, carrying not just ammunition and medical supplies, but an entire shipment of classified satellite components critical to ongoing operations. 1 week later, the Pentagon sent a representative. The man was calm, sharply dressed, and carried a briefcase that he placed on the colonel's desk without a word. When he opened it, inside was a single gleaming metal and a sealed file. "This," the man said, "is for Captain Torres. And this," he gestured to the file, "is for your eyes only." West looked down at the metal, the distinguished flying cross, and then at Elena, who stood at parade rest. "This isn't typical protocol," the representative continued, "but the circumstances are unique. She's to be reinstated immediately to active combat flight status, with access to her previous rank and clearances." Elena didn't smile. She simply nodded, the weight of the moment heavy, but not overwhelming. She'd never flown for medals. She flew because she couldn't stand by while lives were at risk. That evening, after the ceremony, she walked alone to the far end of the airfield. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in deep reds and golds. Her fighter sat on the tarmac, patched and repainted, gleaming under the last rays of light. She placed a hand on the fuselage. "We did good," she whispered. From behind her, West approached quietly. "You know, the brass want to keep this quiet for now. Too many eyes on the theater, too many political strings." "I know," she replied. "They can tell whatever story they want. The people who matter, they know." He hesitated, then added, "You're cleared for any mission. You want Torres. Any jet, any time." She gave a small nod. "Then I'll be ready." As she walked away, the hum of the base around her felt different. Not like the grind of routine, but the quiet before something greater. Somewhere out there, another mission. Would come a call no one else could answer. And when it did, she would be there, not because she had to, but because that's who she was. A pilot, a protector, and now a legend.